Our cells are programmed to respond to light in very specific ways. Modern life has separated us from those inputs. So if we live our life constantly indoors, separate from the natural inputs of natural light, which is the sunrise, the midday sun, the sunset, and even exposure to photons. This is a whole source of energy and an entire source of information that we're not getting into our bodies. That's going to create deficits. It's going to create misfires. So whatever we can do is do our best. And this is where we bring in, to some degree, number one, we get ourselves outside first thing in the morning. We get ourselves outside in the middle of the day. Forget the sunglasses. And then we try to do the best that we can to get outside also at the end of the day, because all that light hitting the back of the eye is what informs our brain of where we are in time.
Nathalie, welcome to the Augmented Life.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this. I did just a massive research spike on your past work in advance, and my eagerness has to do with navigating something that I'm also navigating with the audience of the Augmented Life, which is when we attract an audience of like super optimizers.
Mm-hmm.
There's this open question that I'm navigating for myself, which is the navigating the path towards true, let's say, health and wellness without like just over indexing and over optimizing on sub aspects, you know, and so your work has been important to me in guiding towards fundamentals. So I want to talk about those fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we can connect the fundamental pillars of wellness and the basics everyone should master to some concrete indicators that say, okay, you have mastered them. Now let's talk about, now let's dial in the peptides, if you will.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's, I think, in the document you sent me, I think one of the points you brought up, which is really interesting, is how some people just get lost in this, right? They become so hyper-focused on the data. They become so hyper-focused on optimizing every little piece of their life that sometimes we lose sight of what our life is really all about.
Right. Yeah.
And we see those people out there, right? And I'm not saying that they've completely lost sight, because I don't know them personally, and maybe they have very fulfilled, wonderful social connections. But I think that the minute that we become so fixated on the data and on achieving certain measures, that it starts to isolate us from our social connections and prevents us from really truly enjoying our time on this earth.
Right.
We're running the risk not only of compromising our quality of life, but we're actually running the risk of compromising our results. Right? Because we are not, like, the human experience is not just about cells and carbon and hydrogen and micronutrients and macronutrients. It's about this experience of being human.
Right. And for that matter, it's not about extending time and only time, right? Like, I'm reminded of that old joke, the food here is terrible and such small portions. Like,
Yeah.
If you're living miserably, why do you want to do it for another 100 years? Like, this seems like the wrong maximization.
For sure. And I think that, I think definitely that narrative of health span over lifespan and wanting both, because we are humans and human wants to have their cake and eat it too. So we want to live as long as humanly possible, and we want to look good. We want to feel good. We want to be getting the most out of life. We want it all. And to varying degrees, I think we're moving into a space, certainly initially for people who are, have greater financial means. These things are starting to become much more tangible.
Yeah.
Right? Like the regenerative medicine space is really growing by leaps and bounds. Now, the truth of the matter is that no matter how much money someone has, if they're uber wealthy and they've been burning the candle at both ends for the last 50, 60 years, whatever the case may be, and they're limping in, the chances of them living, over 100 and really well are probably more slim than someone who, if you look at certain people out there who are uber wealthy and who've been treating this body of theirs like a temple and they've been doing all the things, they're in a much better position to avail themselves of these technologies and truly extend their lifespan and health span.
Right, right, right. So, if you have the buying power to, get yourself whatever, like an interesting peptide regimen or rapamycin or fly to another country and, you know, do a couple gene tweaks, um, I that feels elite. It feels good, but as you've spoken about many times, sometimes that's over optimization. You made a metaphor about like calling in the contractor to work on the kitchen, but the house is actually on fire.
Yeah.
Let's talk about getting the house in order first. And especially, what I want to know is like, how do I know, how do I not fool myself? How do I know that I've dialed in my movement, nutrient, sleep, light exposure, and like I'm ready to move to the exotic stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that it depends in many ways, but it goes in degrees, right? So first we start with, how do you feel? When you wake up in the morning, are you filled with vim and vigor, or are you dragging yourself out of bed? Are you making it to bedtime kind of in a reasonable fashion, or are you crawling into bed every night thinking that you're never going to live to fight another day? Like, we start with that. We start with the obvious. Like, how do you feel? And
Right.
sometimes how we feel, quite often, how we feel lines up reasonably well with how we're doing, but you never know. Disease builds over time. Sometimes it builds under the surface, and we have no idea of what's going on in there until it reaches a certain threshold that the body can't manage anymore, and now it shows up. And things like inflammation, you'll feel inflammation, but sometimes you won't feel it that much at the beginning. Or, also we tend to normalize feeling not great because that's just how we feel, right? So
Right.
I think the next level is running tests, like running your labs, like running basic blood work is going to give a well-trained physician and even a biohacker, let's say, right? A really good idea of things like inflammation, blood lipids, even your CBC, like understanding your neutrophils and like the immune cell populations, like all that is going to give some pretty good indication of what's happening under the surface. And then once we've done that basic stuff, so now we want to say, okay, well, let's take a look at, depending on the age of the person, you might want to then say, okay, well, let's take a look at hormones. Are hormones where they need to be? And very often, looking at hormones is going to be informed by how the person's feeling.
Ah, yes. Right.
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 For women, once we're moving through menopause, we know our hormones are whacked. And so definitely getting insight into what's happening at a hormonal level, and then taking whatever steps that is appropriate for the person to rebalance those hormones so that we can have a longer runway.
Right. Right.
Is going to be really important. For men, it's less obvious. Sometimes, we're seeing men using TRT way earlier than ever before. Is that because the bar is higher? Is that because men, like women, aren't sleeping as well? They're not eating as well. They're drinking too much booze. They're staying up too late. Like we're burning the candle at both ends, and then we wonder why the system's not working. So testing, right? Both foundational testing, but then also the more advanced testing is going to give us insight into what's going on
Yeah.
under the surface.
Digging into just this one aspect of wellness, let's call it, hormone optimization. Certainly a lot of people I know are talking about trying or asking me about TRT, for instance.
Mhm.
And separately, I would say that when we think about health fundamentals, I think anyone's doctor points them at diet and exercise. We all know that's fundamental, and that's reflected in your work. But something I've seen as kind of a unique emphasis in your work that I think also in particular has like hormone implications is to consider like light exposure as one of the fundamentals, right? So dial in your movement, yes. Of course, nutrients are important. Of course, sleep is important. But let's talk about the sun.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the thing with light is, this goes back to what as a creature of nature, a creation of nature, let's say, our cells are programmed to respond to light in very specific ways. Modern life has separated us from those inputs, right? So if we live our life constantly indoors, which most of us do, separate from the natural inputs of natural light, which is the sunrise, the midday sun, the sunset, all of and even exposure to photons, right? So exposure to the energy of light. This is a whole source of energy and an entire source of information that we're not getting into our bodies. And so that's going to create deficits. It's going to create misfires. So whatever we can do to get that back in line. So I'm not saying you have to take your desk and put it outside in the backyard and live out there, which some people can and do. But what we can do is do our best. And this is where we bring in, to some degree, number one, we get ourselves outside first thing in the morning. We get ourselves outside in the middle of the day. And we forget the sunglasses. I mean, I've saved thousands of dollars over the last 10 years since I've stopped wearing sunglasses because I would just buy them, break them, or lose them.
Right.
Right. And then we try to do the best that we can to get outside also at the end of the day, because all that light hitting the back of the eye is what informs our brain of where we are in time. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And the light hitting our skin gives information as well. Now, in the middle of the winter, it becomes we can still get out and see the light, but we're not going to get that stimulation from the light, for example, that's going to trigger our body to make vitamin D. And I just keep seeing over and over and over again that vitamin D supplementation misses the mark in so many people. And so what I think is really exciting, and this is where we can use nature, go back to using nature as much as possible. But now there's technology that can help to make up for the loss of nature. So, I've got this cute this looks kind of like an iPad light panel that delivers a very specific dose of UVB, which anybody out there who's very concerned about their skin is like, oh my God, she did not say UVB. Like, you must never. But, the right amount of UVB at the right time in the right dose will trigger my body to make appropriate levels of vitamin D. And here's the cool thing. My body's most likely not going to create super physiological levels of vitamin D from light. It can potentially, if I'm doing like 10,000 or 100,000, I've heard IU of vitamin D a week or something. And that can cause all kinds of trouble down the chain. Because some people, for example, genetically don't do a very good job of converting vitamin D into its active form. And now you get this backup and this buildup of something your body can't even use and might even backfire on you. So I think that whatever we can do to, reconnect with nature, but when that's not available to us because of modern life, look to technology, look to what's available to us to kind of say, okay, how can I replace that? And if you look at this space called biohacking, a lot of what biohackers are trying to do is figure out a way to bring back the benefits of nature.
Right. Yeah. I've been, I transplanted myself to New Hampshire, and I've been working on this tract of land as a kind of respite for my friends. And it is exactly in this way. Like my form of biohacking is helping people rewild themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's super restorative.
Get your hands in the dirt.
Yeah. I used to wear sunglasses as what I thought was a part of my wellness toolkit as well. And a big unlock for me was actually learning a little evolutionary biology. The retinal ganglion cells are evolutionarily more ancient than the other parts of your eye.
Yeah.
And their entire purpose was establishing, your diurnal behavior patterns.
Correct.
So you need to feed those cells, which are themselves photosensitive, with the right frequencies of light that get your hormone schedule working right.
Yeah. And on the other side of the spectrum, we then want to interrupt the artificial light that we're exposed to. I'm not wearing blue blockers now. I could be in my office, but but you better believe, like, at the end of the day, I'm going to want to wear, if I'm going to be exposed to screens, I am going to want to wear some kind of blue blocker just to filter out the artificial blue, right? And the artificial blue light, never mind the fact that it blocks melatonin production, there's now data that says that it ages skin,
Oh, wow.
right? So interesting that it's aging. So that's why, like, there's a product that I use. It's technically a sunscreen, but they've built in features into this face cream that filters out the artificial UVB during the day.
Oh, I love that. Oh, nice. Oh, that's cool. That's some fun chemistry too. Like dialing in the exact absorption levels for particular nanometers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can go deep into the weeds.
Well, okay, but now getting back to, let's say, optimization versus over optimization. To what extent should you work on behavioral factors like, early morning sunlight exposure that's specifically the right wavelength, which means truly early morning,
Mm,
which does seem to change. Like it seems to me that I've been altering um maybe my testosterone levels. It also definitely cortisol, possibly growth hormone, just by literally changing my circadian rhythm.
yeah.
How much do you try to turn the behavioral dial before you then capitulate and are like, okay, it's TRT time?
Yeah. I mean, look, in a perfect world,
Mhm.
we dial in all those lifestyle factors. We lift heavy weights. We regulate the circadian rhythm. We reduce exposure to xenoestrogens and all those chemicals. We do all those things. We make sure we're sleeping, we're recovering, we're doing all the things. And particularly with men, right? With heavy weightlifting, I mean, women too, that's going to bump up testosterone. That's going to bump up growth hormone. It's going to do that. And then I think and then are we going to say to someone, look, if you're not getting up first thing in the morning and you're not managing this, that, and the other thing, then you're SOL. We're not going to give you TRT.
Mhm, mhm.
It's not really fair because people have big jobs, they have big lives, they're doing the best they can,
Right.
as long as they're not out partying all day, right? I mean, even then, I mean, there's an argument that says the truth of the matter is that if you're not doing any of that foundational work to support the TRT, you're not going to get optimal results anyway.
Oh, right.
Is the TRT going to help? Probably. It'll help some, right? I mean, if you have someone whose testosterone, whether it's a man or a woman, that are on the floor, and you start to normalize them a little bit, they're going to feel better. They might have better energy to actually do the work.
Do the behavioral change. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you can kind of bootstrap yourself.
We can't withhold treatment or support because the person's not doing the foundational work. What we want to know is that the person is at least going to lean in and try to do their best to do everything that they can to support the results. And very often what happens is you get this you get people who are more willing and more able to do more of the work.
Yeah, I've also found that in my personal experience. Like, just as a super nerd, I want to solve all problems with my mind, and then it turns out, actually, like, yeah, lifting heavy weights just helps. Just kind of helps everything. The body matters.
Yeah, and it helps your brain too, right? Like, it helps your mood, it helps your brain, it helps your bones, it helps your muscles, like, it just helps all the things.
Yeah.
It's sometimes really hard to convince people of that, though.
Yeah, yeah. This is a world that, right.
Sometimes people, they don't believe us, or
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So again, rewilding.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, the cool thing about rewilding is you don't necessarily have to be in a gym. You could be throwing bales of hay around. That's your heavy lifting right there. Like, what you're doing is going back to a physical lifestyle that is much better suited to us aging better.
Right. Right.
within reason. But if you go back and you look at the way farmers age, man, they age, right? That's a hard life. Like they work really hard. They're out in the sun for too many hours. They don't sleep enough sometimes. Like it's there's it is a luxury of living in the countries that we live in to be able to worry about these things. To be able to say, I get to worry about how well I'm aging. Some people just worry about getting their next meal on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. To a massive extent, still in this world.
Mhm.
My own behavioral goal, like thinking about that kind of physical lifestyle, is I just want to be a really fun grandpa. What I'm going for is I want to be able to get physical with my descendants.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's part of enjoying your life, right? I mean, it's and to live with ease, to live a life that is fun and pain-free and allows you to do the things to enjoy the fruits of your labor, if nothing else.
Yeah. Now so if you think about a bunch of properties like this as kind of like a lagging indicator of success, they're an output. What are the leading indicators that in your experience are like always on the scorecard? Like what metrics should I be adding to my life that are like the core indicators that I can use as a sort of scorecard on my health that means that I am tracking towards being a badass grandpa?
Well, aside from all the stuff we've been talking about, which is like how you feel, how you live, that whole thing. I mean, if you were looking at labs, I think we're looking at inflammation. We're looking at, to some degree, we're looking at blood lipids, right? So your cholesterol, a full cholesterol panel, your APO, little a, little b, like you're looking at those metrics. You're probably, you're availing yourself of new technologies. So you might be doing a CIMT scan on an annual basis to say, well, am I accumulating plaque in here? Because I know everybody says not to worry about saturated fat and or carbs or whatever the poison is that you think is an issue, but is my body responding to that, to whatever I'm doing appropriately?
Right.
Right. And so let's not be afraid to look at some of these more advanced tests. There's there's a metabolomics test out there called Theriome. And Theriome is really fascinating in the sense that it gives insight into the pathways of the body and what it's doing with the micronutrients, what it's doing from an oxidative stress perspective. Are the mitochondria working properly? Is the body able to handle inflammation? And then on the flip side of doing a theriome test, half the time they're going to tell you to stop taking half the supplements you're taking, right? Because you're not processing them properly. And maybe what we need to do is pull back a little bit, and we need different types of things. Like they're going to give you insight. It's not, I'm actually going to be recording a podcast in the next few weeks comparing the theriome test to a vibrant micronutrient test and a SpectraCell micronutrient test
Oh,
to
awesome.
see, right? To see how do these, because they're all good tests, but they all give you slightly different views on what's happening under the surface. And what's happening under the surface, that insight is the thing that's going to give us the information to say, okay, I'm on the right track. I'm aging well. I'm not rusting from the inside. My rate of pace of aging is not faster than the minutes on the clock kind of thing. So, the biological age tests that are out there, like the True Diagnostics, for example, that are looking at DNA methylation and all the different clocks that they look at. I'm not going to say there's a perfect test. I think those guys are doing a really good job. And if you're going to do a True Diagnostic, stick to True Diagnostic. It's like picking if you have a scale at home, use that scale to measure, because there's a few different tests out there and they're all using slightly different algorithms, slightly different things that they're measuring. So pick a team and stick with the team so that even if the absolutes are not bang on, although I think they're getting pretty good, especially on the pace of aging clocks, you have a relative measure of how am I doing this year relative to that last year?
Yeah, nice. I have just started a longitudinal CIMT study with a friend of mine who is vegan. So like I'm bringing the keto lifestyle, he's bringing the vegan lifestyle, and we're going to see how this goes over the next 10 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's really interesting, right? I believe that the keto lifestyle can be fabulous for one person and a disaster for the other.
Right. Yeah.
I think the vegan lifestyle is tougher to make work long term for almost anyone. Like interestingly enough, I recently was at an event and there was a guy there doing liver scans. And he scanned the liver of a person that we know who is a vegan and has been for years and is very active and does everything right and is super healthy, doesn't touch alcohol.
Mhm.
He had fatty liver.
Oof. Oh my gosh.
And he was shocked. Shocked. So could it be that all these that vegan lifestyle, although it fits this person's emotional needs, right? And their philosophy of life is not to take another life and whatever the case may be, and on paper they're doing everything right, but somehow that's not serving his physiology as well as he thought it would.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Right? So the good news is the guy that's doing the scanning actually has a product that can reverse that fatty liver in the space of a couple of months.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
I'm really excited about the long-term potential of biohackers to just be laying down these longitudinal records.
Yeah.
It makes me really optimistic about what science can understand, let's say 10 years from now.
100%. Like you and your friend may both do great.
Right. Yeah.
But if he became if he went keto and you went vegan, it really may not suit either of your physiologies.
Right.
So you'll get a reverse. It remains to be seen, like most people, well, not like most people, like many people in my space.
Right.
I feel like being vegan, it's a lot of work to do it well, to do it properly. And it's really easy to build up deficits in places. And on the keto side, I will tell you this, like, I'm not a massive fan of constant keto. I'm more of a fan of cyclic keto.
Yeah, that's also been working well for me. Exactly.
Right, because you wanna maintain metabolic flexibility,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
right? We were built with the 2 pathways.
I also want to be present. I want to be socially present in times of celebration, which for at least the past several thousand years has meant feasting. And like, I just don't want to be a buzzkill at the feast. You know what I mean? So I will be there and I will break my keto for that and then go back to it.
Good. Well, as long as you can maintain that flexibility. I mean, I think the challenge with long-term chronic keto is that sometimes people sacrifice metabolic flexibility, and then when they do feast on those days, they have they see horrifying blood sugar spikes in the whole 9
Oh,
yards.
right.
So, but I think it's an interesting thing for you to keep an eye on, right? So you slap on a continuous glucose monitor every once in a while and see what's happening with your blood sugar. Introduce some healthy carbs and see what happens. Like, is your body able to flip in and out? That's amazing. That's what you need to know.
Yeah. Now, before we leave health indicators, I want to throw a wild card question at you. So I, like many people, have been slapping on more wearables. So now, as a result of the technology, and not before, I've learned about HRV, and so now I have a bunch of software in my life that tells me that it will happily report on this thing as if it's an important indicator of health. Um, the And speaking of longitudinal learning, like, so now that's been out for 10 years. Like, is it really helpful? Like, I feel like step count was never a super useful metric. It was just the thing that could be measured. So I'm like suspicious about HRV in the same way. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think that HRV, it's less important than people would have us believe. It's not as it's very hard to measure, right? And so the wearables that are measuring HRV, they're measuring something, but I think that there are people who would say, for example, there's a guy, Dr. Dan Cohen, who brought out a device called Soltec Health,
Mm.
which is a device that actually helps to improve your deep sleep, which there's not a lot of devices out there that actually work to improve deep sleep. He calls and you wear a watch, like a wearable wrist. It's not even a watch. You have a wrist wearable that communicates with the device at the foot of your bed that gets these magnets basically that will entrain your brainstem into a frequency to get you into deeper sleep.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, you can stimulate delta wave. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Correct. And so his device measures deep sleep, REM sleep, but they don't even bother with HRV.
I see.
He basically calls BS on most HRV. Now, having said that, I'm not willing to throw it away completely, because I do think that even if the HRV measurement you're getting from your Aura ring or your Ultra Human ring or your Whoop or your like whatever it is you're wearing, it's going to give you a relative measure from day to day. So it may not be an absolute, but it will give you a relative measure from day to day of how well balanced your nervous system, your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system is. And if it helps you to you shouldn't need it, because if you wake up in the morning and you're dragging your butt, no, you should not go do that kick-ass CrossFit workout, right? Maybe you should go to the sauna, or you should do a yoga workout, or just a stretching routine, or just go for a walk outside. You should know this, but in a world where we've kind of disconnected so much,
Right. Yes, exactly. Yes.
right? Maybe some people need that reminder and that little tangible data point that says, reconsider your decision right now.
Yeah.
Half the time I see people who ignore it. They're like, yeah, I booked my class, I'm going.
Oh,
Like today
right.
is squat day, I'm going in. I'm not
Yeah,
missing
right.
squat day today. So I don't think it's useless, though. I think that data points to your and this is a question you mentioned in before we recorded. I think that you're over fixated on the metrics when they start keeping you up at night.
I like that. Yeah.
When the obsession with waking up in the morning and how did I sleep? Dude,
Right.
wake up in the morning, don't turn anything on. How do I feel? Right? And then maybe you'll look at your metrics and go, huh, that's interesting.
Right.
And then you might notice that if the metrics weren't great, but you felt okay in the morning, but man, at 3:00 in the afternoon today, you've really hit a wall. And that might tell you that your sleep wasn't as restorative the night before. So now where the value lies is, what did I do yesterday that I don't want to do today? Right? Did I eat too late? Did I do a late workout? Did I not do any kind of like, what is it that I did yesterday that might have contributed to that I can change today to get a better outcome?
I'm learning this. I'm learning this from the Fulcro early adopters so if you've become a Fulcro customer, like almost by definition, you have wearables or that's like why you're into our software. And something that we were learning from an early cohort was, people don't want to wake up with a score. They're like, don't show me scores. I don't want to be judged. I do want to record my subjective feeling of how easy it was to wake up. And so we had to build these software features just to support that. But that is helping people figure out what was going on the day before. They're learning the causal knobs to turn.
Correct.
From having this habit of just tuning in like to themselves instead of looking at some number that's judging them on a scale of 0 to 100.
Exactly. And I think that the ultimate outcome would be no longer needing the wearable on a day-to-day basis, right? So that you can and I've stepped away from my wearables for periods of time. And then if I feel like things are starting to go off the rails somehow, I might go back in and wear it for a little while and see what might be happening under the surface. But that should be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal, to me, shouldn't necessarily be that I'm going to be wearing at least one wearable for the rest of my life. It's really a way for me to tap in and validate certain behaviors and certain interventions,
Right.
measure them, and then step away from it again.
Right. Yeah, and like I am trying to humbly figure out not what's like capital R right, like not what is like universally true for all humans, but just like what's right for me. Just lots of little n equals one experiments to figure out. Yeah, for
Yeah.
instance, am I a keto person, a cyclic keto person, a vegan?
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's all we can do.
Yeah, right. So there's another dimension of understanding yourself that I know you've done a lot of work in. So I want to get into, which is let's like living with epigenetic wisdom. Um, and
Mm.
something that I got into with Dr. Lufkin was this idea that certain kinds of bad genes you shouldn't think of as being like the gene that means you will get, Alzheimer's. Like, don't think of APOE4 as the Alzheimer's gene. Think of it as something that is going to determine how your body deals with inflammation, and so you better like have a lifestyle that takes that into account. And
Yeah.
uh, you know, you've gone in multiple dimensions here in this way. Like, help us think about like what do we incorporate into our health span? Let's just build on APOE4 itself. What does that tell you about how to change your daily behavior for maximum health span?
So if you're carrying especially 2 copies, but even 1 copy of the ApoE4,
Yeah.
that does have significant implications, and I would not call it a bad gene. I would just call it a variant, right? The people who trained me in epigenetic coaching
Mhm.
didn't never talked about a mutation, they talked about variants.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
ApoE4 may actually give a person a survival advantage in certain environments,
Sure.
right?
Right. Yeah.
It does not give you a survival advantage.
Exactly. Something selected for it. Right.
Right. It does not give you a survival advantage in a world where we have access to highly hyper palatable foods,
Donuts.
high fat foods, high sugar foods, donuts every single day. Like it does not give us an advantage. So what you need is awareness. It doesn't necessarily mean a person's going to develop Alzheimer's. What it does mean is that a person with an ApoE4 gene is going to have to be mindful of things like their body's response to saturated fats. They might do better with a more Mediterranean type diet. And by Mediterranean, I don't mean sitting and eating bread and olive oil all day. I mean eating varied plants, lean meats, fish, extra virgin olive oil for sure. You're not a Southeast Asian, so you're not gonna be able to coat everything that you eat in coconut oil and think that you're gonna get away with it because you're not. Like, be aware, and then if you still don't believe it, then at least find a doctor or a or a practitioner who's gonna walk with you and help you to monitor your body's response to whatever it is you are doing to say, "Okay, you know what? Like, your blood lipids are kinda going sideways. Your inflammation markers are off the charts. Like, we need to dial this stuff back. We need to change things so that we create that resilience in your system that won't lead to a diagnosis down the road, right? So if and Alzheimer's, I know you mentioned earlier, Alzheimer's by some people is often referred to as type 3 diabetes. I think that can be part of what drives Alzheimer's, but it's not the only thing that drives Alzheimer's. So, there's a toxic story, there's a microbiome story, there's lots of different aspects to neurodegenerative diseases. And and yeah, like insulin resistance in the brain is part of it, but that means that maybe we just need to be really diligent about our exercise and our and keeping an eye on how is our body responding to the diet that we choose. One thing's for
Right.
sure, if
Right.
you're ApoE4, none of us can manage high carbs, high fat, but if you're ApoE4, you definitely cannot manage high carbs, high fat. You got to pick a team and then
Right.
figure it out, and then measure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So there's basically, if I can condense this, I'd say that there's almost hidden lifestyle indicators in your genome, right? Like you want to inform some of your lifestyle choices by what you have this predisposition toward.
Yeah, like you want to be aware of those predispositions, right? The thing with the interesting thing about genetics is I think that as much as we know about, many different SNPs and what they mean, there's a whole collection that we have no awareness of. And I think that any of us who've done any level of studying of the human body and human systems, anyone with any reasonable amount of humility understands that the body has a lot of redundancies built into the system
Right.
that we're not necessarily aware of. So for that reason, and for the reason also that we don't that researchers haven't fully figured out all the different variations of connecting the dots. And maybe that'll be one of the best uses of AI, is understanding that complexity. I think that knowing what lives in the genome as far as what we know right now, right, is really good to know so that you can keep an eye out for stuff. But just because you carry a gene for something doesn't mean that that gene is going to be expressed.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes, exactly. You don't know just from that it got turned on.
Like, look at how with MTHFR, which, is one of the most used and abused and over worried about variations. On paper, a far larger number of people are, I think it's undermethylators, than actually show up in life as undermethylators. Like your diet might be correcting for it. You might be
Right.
taking the right supplements. There might be a separate kind of redundant pathway somewhere that's kicking in that we don't know about. So just because you're showing up as an undermethylator, you also need to look at the symptomatology. You also need to look at how are you processing things. And then you might say, you know what, we could probably support this with supplement A, B, or C.
Yeah, I see.
So don't assume.
I've spent a lot of time just kind of like browsing Snippedia like Wikipedia.
Yeah.
It will produce humility about like the current status of human knowledge. It's like a lot of maybe this is what's happening, but we don't really know.
But we don't really know, right? And then we haven't fully connected the dots. You know why? Because it's an endless matrix of dots. Right? So there's an endless number of connections that can affect each other. Like it's an integrated system that we never got a manual for.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and we're still even learning what the ingredients are. Right?
Correct.
Like, yeah. The microbiome. It seems like we're just in the beginning of quantification there and understanding what the causal links could possibly be.
Yeah. Correct. So, but in the end, I do think that going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is the foundations of light, movement, nervous system regulation, sleep, eating a varied diet, and just kind of chilling out a little bit.
Right.
It'll go a long way.
Yeah.
It'll really take you a long way. It won't do it all. Right? So, but at least get that foundation together. What I see is too many people coming in hot, really with lots of different things going on. They're coming in like your typical house on fire and they're like, okay, what's the peptide to what should I be taking?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know. Like, what have you got going on first? Like, I had a call with someone recently and this person has nothing going on. And he goes, well, I just want to take peptides. And I'm like, well, why? You don't need them. I mean, there's bioregulators that we could do. Bioregulators is it's a different discussion. Like we can do bioregulators as we're aging as a way to kind of refresh the system and renew and drive some rejuvenation at a cellular level. But when it comes to the repair peptides or the growth hormone secretagogues or the immune peptides, I want to know that we have an imbalance we're addressing before I start throwing things around like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've also been slow to recognize, but I'm trying to incorporate this, which just goes to your lesson about tuning into how you feel. Cassie Kosakoff, when she was on the show, she's this vaunted decision scientist, and she just trying to drill into my head, like, how you feel is data. Like the data doesn't just come from the rigs. Like
Yeah.
feelings are data. Pay attention. There's signal there.
Yeah. And that's where, I mean, I don't do this nearly enough, but definitely, opening well, I mean, actually I do this instinctively, but opening your eyes in the morning and checking in with yourself.
Right.
How do I feel? And if you need it, not everybody does, but for some people, it's really helpful if they have a notebook by the bed, at least for a period of time, to write down, like to track like what time they went. If they're not wearing a wearable, what time did you go to bed last night? What time did you wake up this morning? Did you wake up during the night? How do you feel? What's your energy like? Are you feeling stressed? All of these metrics, jotting them down because we do a really good job of forgetting day to day.
Yes. The meat space brain is not good at this. You need to get it out of that into some sort of written record. And then the patterns that only unfold over a long time scale can be made available to your conscious mind. And then you go, oh.
Yeah, like, how interesting, right? I didn't
Yeah.
think I was getting any better, but a month ago, I was ranking 2 on my energy scale, and all of a sudden, now I'm ranking a 6. Okay, I'm not a 10, but actually I'm better than 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And direction matters. Direction matters so much.
Mhm. It's all about the trends, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, on that note, people who want to set new highs, get going in the right direction, to tell us how we find your work.
Thank you. Well, my biggest body of work is my podcast, so it's Longevity with Nathalie Niddam. We share a lot from the podcast and a lot of other things as well on Instagram at Nathalie Niddam. I have a membership community if anybody really wants to hang out with me. I mean, not everybody does, but for people who do, I have a membership community on Circle, which is a platform. So to sign up for the newsletter, to find out about the membership community and all that stuff, you just go to natniddam.com to my website, and all that information's there, or on Instagram at Nathalie Niddam, or of course on the podcast.
Nice. Natalie, it was a pleasure having you. This was a wide-ranging, super in-depth conversation. I loved it.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for inviting me. It was great to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.